Nice.
Well, they.
Good evening.
Hey, good evening. We are war. Let's go.
Absolutely. So we just had a big, celebration. We're an old country now. We're looking good for the age, but we're getting up there in years. 250.
250 years old.
And a lot's changed. A lot stayed the same. People still, hate politics. People, still hate taxes, and both still exist. But,
Yeah, some people think it's a badge of honor to pay taxes.
Ooh, I don't know about that one. Especially up here in the Commonwealth, I feel like we get super hit with that exorbitant fee of pay your fair share.
Yeah.
Jose's coming to say hi real quick.
Hey, Jose.
Go ahead. You lay down next to me. So tonight I am sporting a Regiment Gaming jersey.
Ooh.
That if the back will show. Well, Hellfish.
Oh, very nice.
They are a good organization. If you get a chance, I will throw their Discord in the link here in a minute. But they always have
no exaggeration, man. Like if you're a veteran and you meet the requirements, they'll ship you a gaming PC. And I'm like, dang, that is not, getting a gaming PC from anybody for free and they weren't like junk PCs either, as some of these guys do. Like decent parts, decent specs. Like, wow.
They do. They actually, and folks have, sent them messages saying, hey, I put in for this thing, a while back, and, why is this guy getting it now? All of a sudden this, and they're like, we are working our way through the list. They're like, we have gotten a lot of people requesting, these care packages to get these gaming PCs. And, as the stuff comes in and, as things did get more expensive here with, the parts for it, it became a little more difficult to get them, quickly together and out. So they are still working on their list as things come in. If something comes in that's, more of a, priority emergency situation where they, need to get something in the hands of a soldier on active duty or, some soldiers that are forward deployed to be able to, really make an impact, obviously that's going to happen. And, but they're working their way. You get free games. They're always getting connections with different, game makers that want to be able to get their new software out and, tested. And, veterans and, military are great, group of people to, be able to test something and give you honest feedback. We're not a group that's going to be easily influenced by, a $20 free game and, to just give it good comments. I feel like military and vets, will actually stand by what we, think about something, tell it like it is. Get the and Regiment actually has a partnership with the DAV right now.
Oh, really?
They do. So they're doing a lot of things together with both the DAV events. They'll have a regiment table at now, and then they're also handing out information for folks to be able to learn about the DAV and join, and be able to get advocated for while they are at gaming events. So it's a good little crossover of the two worlds.
Well, let me ask you this seriously. You know, we're not exactly teenagers or young kids or even like young men. We're kind of getting up there, and I'll tell people, yeah, I'm taking a day off. I can tell you one thing for a fact, Mikey. When the new Gears of War drops, I am taking the day off. I am taking the day off to play the new Gears of War. I don't care what you think about me. But there's that, but there's also this thing where I'm like, I'm trying to tell people like, we don't really have a way to study it, or I haven't figured out a way to study it. But I gotta think for veterans who are isolated and alone, and then maybe get on the PS5, Xbox preferably for me, or PC game, and they get on and they have to roll with a crew with Escape from Tarkov or Sea of Thieves or Destiny, God rest his soul, anything like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think got to roll with a crew and go through a raid or complete a mission together, or they're playing, Fortnite or Warzone or whatever. They're not physically with somebody, but they're part of a team again. What's your view on that? I think I can't prove it, but I'm thinking about going down this rabbit hole. I think video games have saved more lives than people realize.
I agree. And I think that's, one of the things that, creating Hellfish Haven and getting the information out there was, not specifically to make Hellfish Haven the end all be all, but to have, gaming as an option for these different, veteran posts, and have it, be an outreach to, get out to people, because we can reach a veteran where they are with gaming. You can reach out and, touch somebody without having to have them, come into a smoky building or, a bar that they're uncomfortable at. They're able to stay with in their comfort zone, and you can get out and reach them, and you can, work on that camaraderie that's lost when you leave the service. Because, there's too much of the isolation and the, getting in your own head, letting it build up, how many, guys, over the age of 50, just all of a sudden straight up, drop dead. They've built up, everything for years, hiding it, burying it down, pushing all that everything in, and finally it gives up on them. So, that's one of those things where I think, the gaming would be a great, study to see what it's doing.
Well, I want to drop this chat in the chat with you first, but I'm reading the New York Post, and there's this article about women getting to like 55, 60 and saying, you know what, I'm done with marriage, and they have no problem making their husband and their families start all over again. And I have to think that, okay, that's your choice. I don't think it's the best choice. That's your choice. But there's another party that has to start their life all over again. And for a lot of men who are going through divorce or separation, civilian, military, or otherwise, there was a time where, the reason I'm so passionate about Gears of War, there's a time where, okay, you know what? My week has stunk. I've got no money. I've got nothing at all. But you know what? Saturday night at 10 o'clock for my central, brethren, we're going to get online and play Horde mode for Gears. And
Yep.
they were happy. They were happy that I was there. It was just like pure fun. It was, hey, let's do this. Let's work on our strategy and tactics. Let's get that achievement, guys. And it wasn't a big deal, but thinking back, I'm like, what would I have done if I didn't have things like Gears or Borderlands to play? I don't know what would have happened. And so
Absolutely. And they
when
show
regiment,
too, like how hard it is to, to make a new friend after a certain age, that,
yeah,
you wind up with only, a couple of, solid people that are in your life that know what's going on in your day to day. And then if this, reading this article, you're starting again, late in life, you know, you're not going to want to, go out and rebuild everything and start again. What are you going to do if, your only friend was your significant other?
well, to your point, most guys I know my age who've been married for 20 plus years don't really have any friends. Most of the people he hangs out with are his wife's friends. You know,
Yep.
unless he's a member of unless he has a golfing buddy or a motorcycle club or a hunting buddy, there's not a infrastructure of people he can go to reconnect. So it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And so when Regiment came out, I gotta tell you honestly, I was a little suspicious. I'm like, really, they're really pro veteran. They're really about getting the veteran gamer in there because COD tried it with some of the Call of Duty stuff. I'm like, well, it kind of worked, but I wasn't really that impressed. But as time went on, man, I'm like, they're giving away gaming rigs to veterans. And I'm like, that is not a cheap rig. That's not like they went and found sourced cheap parts and just tossed them in a, cheap, cool looking case and said, here you go. Those are quality parts, man. Quality builds. It was really like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously.
Yep. And well, I'm just trying to make it a little bit bigger here so I can throw it all up. But I'm gonna do a little screen share for you guys real quick. So I can show you guys, what you've got when you go over to the, uh all right. So you check it out and you want to join, just right there, connect to Discord.
I got my Discord connected.
Uh, shows the different events going on, the different games, that you can be able to get, they're giving away, right here, games for vets. You just simply sign up and tell them the games that you're interested in, and when they get something in, they'll send you out a code and be able to get it.
It's wild, man. It's wild, and so I almost want to look up some of these. I mean, those are big time sponsors. DAV is not a small sponsor.
Yeah.
I really want to understand. I gotta think, Mikey, the VA's looked at this at least on a casual level. I'm just,
And you see this here, this is what you're talking about. This is the supply
right?
drop. These are top of the line,
I mean, that took some effort to put together. Like, that's not just some base build. On my other live here, I got Triple Threat Vets podcast. How you doing? On the TikTok live, talking to 40 Mike with W.A.R. But Sea of Thieves, that's a great game, man. That's a great game that you can get into and play.
yeah. And it is, a lot of them are, that, multiplayer based where, even if you don't know anybody to begin with, after a couple of rounds, you are going to know people. You are going to have, guys that you can play with, and, you can get set up the notification that, when, somebody goes online, to let you know, so you can jump in and, get a couple of rounds in with a buddy and, and make these new friendships.
Yeah.
And even, they even have things now for, they're, setting up, job programs, being able to get you to be able to,
What's that? That's the drone one. I didn't see that there.
it looks like you're able to, give training, mentorship and, job connection in the drone industry.
I'm studying for my Part 107 right now.
I will add that to the bookmarks to be able to check this out, more later.
I just got a old DJI Mini 2 working.
So it looks like there's a training center. Is that New Hampshire or Vermont?
I can't tell. I can't read it.
Let's see real quick. Just down the bottom, like Hudson, New Hampshire. So
That's not that far. I don't think so
Yep.
anyway. Let me look.
And I mean, look at all these different, affiliates that they're, working with. This right here, I think, would be the best too. Is be able to do it, recreationally. Flying. Like I know a lot of people do those simulators.
Yep.
That people set up when they do gaming on that, and guys will do a gaming simulator, whether it's a flight simulator or a trucking simulator, things like that. Just something that you don't really have to put a lot of high energy and effort into. That you can just kind of go through the motions and the familiar sounds and the familiar things that you can just unwind and relax and go through the day to day.
So Hudson, New Hampshire is about an hour from me. Check it out, man. Although I'm not really, I know you can make money in the drone industry. I'm not saying you can't. I just, I'm trying to tell people, man, if you're going to buy a drone, even if it's a sub 259 gram one, you better have your 107, man. I mean, I've seen these people get busted during the World Cup and the 4th of July. The ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
So do you want to explain what that is to folks?
So the Part 107 is the unmanned aircraft certification that allows you to fly drones that weigh over 259 grams, which is about, I think, anywhere from 10 ounces. Let's just call it that. And it's good information about what you should do for safety, how high you should fly, what you should do if you're near an airport. It's really interesting. The FAA owns the airspace. Even if you buy a piece of property, the airspace above it is owned by the FAA. The only exception to that are national parks. You can be fully licensed unless you get clearance. You can't do anything in a national park. You just can't. But the 107 is designed to teach you the basics of safety, how to do airport nomenclature, read a map, understand tolerances and variances, things like that, how to find true north, what to do if you crash your drone into somebody. And I was at the VA last week, and I had my drone there and I was allowed to fly it, but they didn't have to tell me. I'm like, I can't fly this near anybody. So
Yep.
I was a good 100 yards away from the crowd to be safe. And some people don't think about that, and they hit a tree or something, and that drone falls into a playground and hits some kid or an animal, and then you've got big problems. If you fly your drone over a crowd of people, those props should be protected or enclosed. And if you have that and got the appropriate permission, you're fine. My drone doesn't have a means for that, so I didn't fly it there. But it's just something that's good to know. I really like trying to incorporate drone footage into some of the videos, and the Oscar Mike radio program you'll have coming up tonight will have some of that footage I shot. And it's a very interesting discipline. So it's all good. And yeah, I'm gonna put more drone footage on TikTok for sure for all the people checking in the live and watching it there. So there's that. But yeah, man, I really think that I'm really going back to this thing where it's simple things, man. I think it's simple things like inviting well, you don't you can so for Darth Vader, you cannot fly almost all national parks are will ban drones outright. They don't want the animals bothered in national parks. Also, they don't want historic structures damaged in national parks. You can get a app on your phone that will show you safe zones where you can fly your drone, no problem, up to 400 feet. And it will also have zones that are, cautionary or restricted. If it's in a flight path near an airport, you shouldn't fly there. Or if you are going to try to fly there, you should get the airports or FAA's approval to fly there. And this is important, especially when you're doing work with that drone. There's several drone jobs out there, but yeah, you know, Topeka, Kansas, you go out 5 miles out in the town, you're probably gonna have a problem, but you shouldn't exceed 400 feet. A lot of people want to do that, but I'm like, well, it's all fun and games until you hit some, you know, hit some aircraft flying.
And now I've seen like a lot too with like I've got the Gillette Stadium down the street right now, known as Boston Stadium. And
How is that Boston Stadium, dude? That's not Boston Stadium.
And it's just wild, like the fact that even on the highway signs they just put a soccer ball over the word Gillette, to be able to say, hey, this is what's going on. We've got this in the area. We don't want to give them free advertising, but they do. They've got it going on, and it's crazy the amount of people that come in, and the things that they do. They had race cars down at the gas stations, a mile down the road. Monster Energy was there. Emily was psyched. She's like, free stuff on tables. So, it's just been wild to see. But like, I have seen a lot of drones flying around. But like, once it gets to like a certain area near the stadium, it's almost like there's something stopping them.
Yeah, I think there's drone defense systems that will jam signals and stuff like that. And also, I mean, if you're smart and if you're, following the rules, probably for the World Cup, they have it restricted. And so if they catch your drone in that restricted zone, they're going to disable it or track you back based on your drone serial number. They can do that. And you're going to get arrested. So for me, it wasn't even worth doing it. It's not even, why even be in that location?
And so when I was in Kuwait, we were at Kuwait Naval Base. We were, right on the port. You could see right across, Troy Brand at night, and they had a drone that would go up in the air, the Scan Eagle, and would go fly for a few hours. And when it come back to land on the airfield, it would have to go by a few of the guard towers. And every now and again, you would get a report back from the Scan Eagle pilot, saying, hey, you got a couple of guys that are sleeping guard tower 7, or, hey, tell the guy to, close his laptop when we go by, that we don't want to see that stuff.
Wow.
It was just like, crazy what this thing could, see. And, of course, my guys aren't seeing it come in because, it's, hundreds of feet above them. And then all of a sudden it just drops down and it's, it lands.
The cameras on those are getting a lot better. I mean, my V-copter, the Falcon Mini, I was surprised just how crystal clear it can be.
Yep.
So anything going on in nonprofit world, Mikey?
Yeah, the two things going on. We've got Kids Day coming up in North Attleboro.
Oh, nice.
And what we're gonna be doing is the VFW is gonna have a table there, and on Sunday I'm gonna join them. I'm gonna bring out the the arcade basketball machines, the little the ones where you can shoot the hoops, it registers, and you can do 1-on-1 against somebody. And so I have 2 of those. I've got one that's like I'd probably say like a 7-year-old to like maybe like a 12-year-old size one, and then I've got like an adult size one, so that way folks can get in the action and enjoy it. And I'm also going to bring out the patches that I have. When my barber passed away a few years ago, he had a bunch of patches on his wall. Folks that were in the service, of every branch would, drop off a patch when they came to get their haircut. And so I figured with it being the, America 250, that it would be a nice little thing to be able to, have out and go through and show the different units and things like that have just, made a connection in this one small town, and, show the reach that the veteran community really has, worldwide, with all these different units and the experiences that, folks have had. So I figured that would be just a little book that folks can go through and see the different units and patches that are out there. We've got World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, the airport mission folks were on, have a special patch for that. And, Guard, Army, active, Marine Corps. We've got everything, it's a little bit. There are no Space Force patches, though. So if anybody's out there got a Space Force patch, and wants to send it in, we'll gladly add it to the collection. But it was just, when he passed away, I thought, what could we do to, keep the tradition and the memory of all those folks, going, because they donated a part of themselves to that barbershop to be remembered, to have a legacy, keep going. And I didn't want to see that go away. So that's why I put this little book together, to be able to continue the legacy that was left there, even though the barber's gone, because he was a chaplain's assistant. He was a Vietnam era veteran, and he was super afraid of getting tattoos. So he had gotten the beginning of a tattoo, and he has the A for Army. Like, that's it. He's just had the A. That was the only part of it he had, and then he quit on the tattoo. So he used to, have me come in at the end of the day to get the haircuts. And once I joined the military, he was like, "Your money's no good here anymore." He would have me get him sweatshirts or T-shirts from different bases that I went to, and that would be the trade-off to get my haircut from him. And so we did that. As soon as I would come in at the end of the day, he'd put the shades down, close the door, and go into the back of the bathroom area, light up a butt, and sit there with his, Miller High Lifes, and start, the end of the day shift early. But he was also the same guy that was like, the first time he, "Okay, come to American Legion meeting." So I went to the meeting with him. He's like, "Hey, Mike's gonna be the new junior vice." And that's how I wound up on the executive board there, the Legion. So I went from junior vice, senior vice to the commander. I was commander at the Foxborough Post 93 for 3 years. One of them I was actually in Iraq for, so I had to send email votes to have people vote and pass things there. But, a lot of that is having a good adjutant. And then what was tough about that was the Legion itself only had a urinal in the downstairs bathroom, and you can see Travis is working on his crochet as he's going on there. And the Legion only had a urinal downstairs. And so folks that were, disabled, wheelchair bound, had a tough time walking, couldn't make it down up the stairs, to be able to use the restroom. So they stopped coming. A lot of female veterans didn't want to come because, they didn't want to go up into the dark hall to be able to use the restroom. If you had any, bowel issues or anything like that, or, you had Taco Bell early in the day, you weren't going to go to the Legion because you're like, "Oh, I'm not going to make it." And then it's like, you see all this stuff, and then you see the numbers start dwindling. And so I suggested, "Hey, let's do something. Let's change things going on." Because we had put a pinball machine in there. We had put Buck Hunter. We had done Golden Tee and Silver Strike. And we had really started to, get folks to be more active. Guys were coming in on Saturday mornings to get a new high score on Buck Hunter to beat the last guy that had it, during the week. And, guys were, having 3 or 4 guys would have a Silver Strike league that would, they would do, 3 games of bowling, and then, just hang out and have coffee. And it was, it was getting things done. And then I said, "Hey, why don't we just move this upstairs and, have, the games, in the foyer and things like that. We can still rent the hall on days that, it's rented, and we can go downstairs on those days during those hours and then just have the bar be upstairs where we can actually have, natural light come in, and, we're not, the creeps in the basement.
Right,
And,
right.
The guys, we voted and we got, we changed over from oil to natural gas, got the whole building changed over. One of the guys, his wife passed away, so they used her death, like gratuity, or whatever it's called, uh, and used some of the money from her life insurance to be able to get uh, the heating system, completely, pulled out and rebuilt. And then all of a sudden they have a vote and they decide that they don't want to move the bar upstairs. They want to keep it downstairs. And then a year later, we had to sell the building. So they chose to sell the building and lose the place for veterans to be able to come, for the community to be able to use. We had lacrosse teams, baseball teams, everything used it for their signups and their banquets and their, the different, events that, people didn't want to rent a bigger space or things like that. We would often donate to the organizations to, be part of the community. And, to just lose that all of a sudden because, guys didn't want to move a bar upstairs, just really, was, biting the hand, despite you.
I don't know what to think. I just don't know. And the reason I say that is because, hey, there are real, like it's happening, especially in this state where more and more of these places are being shut down. They can't be supported anymore. And people, are just, losing what they had. Right. And
Yep.
it's like, okay, the problem is, once these places are gone, they don't come back.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only exception that I've ever known about is the American Legion VFW, I forget which one it is, in Sharon, Mass. They shut it down, and then somebody came in and got it turned back on. But most of these places, as you know, is once the Legion or VFW leave them, and the town or somebody assumes them, the town might use a building, the town might sell a property, but they're not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And it just leads me into my last little thing here is, whether we want to admit it or not, Mikey, the people that used to run those, and yeah, some of these old guys can be cranky. I get it. They don't like new stuff. They're old, they're cranky, they've seen it all. They just want to come in, have their beer, hang with their buddies, and not be bothered. And I get that. But I also get the, hey, if you want people to continue to advocate for you and write the letters, write the emails, call your elected officials, and pound the pavement for you, you've got to make it younger friendly. You've got to let some of the younger guys come in there with some new ideas and support them, and just enjoy the vibe, man. And it's got to be difficult too, because I'm like telling some of our older brothers, we don't want to come into a place and drink. A lot of us really don't want to do that. We want a chance to socialize, fellowship, and come and do good, and have it family friendly. And so I don't think it's critical mass yet, but I think it's right there on the tippy toe for a lot of these places. They're just going to lose what they had.
And that's one of the big things that, I've been happy to be part of with the North Attleboro VFW is, the revitalization that's going on there. They've got a good group of, members that really want to, put the organization on their back and, and revitalize it and make it, a part of the community again, and make it a place that, people are comfortable to come in and socialize. And one of those things that we've done is, for the last 2 years, every month, with the exclusion of, some months, vacations happen, and, during the summer months, sometimes we'll take a month off because there won't be anybody around. We've done every month a coffee and camaraderie event. We show up at 10 a.m. We set up board games, card games, video games. we've got free coffee, donuts, muffins, and we have the posters open, and guys are able to come in and and utilize the space and have their family with them. The kids can go play video games together with other veteran family members. And we've had guys that are right out of the service. That we've got guys that are still in for a few more years that have come to the event. And then we had a gentleman that he came to the event after Memorial Day last year, and then got a membership to join the VFW, and became an official VFW member on his 103rd birthday. And so it's just we've had the gauntlet of different people show up at these events, and I really think that that's making an impact and doing something, because they're not having to choose between going to a veteran event and spending the day with their kids, or choosing between the family and the friends. They can do both for that little time. And that's one of the things that we're gonna push at the event for Kids Day is hey, we've got the table set up, coffee, you can come sit down, relax, you can use the basketball thing, you can learn a little bit about the different history of the units that the organization is touched with. And then you can also see what's going on in the VFW to make things better. The combat tested gaming that's going on. They have their own Discord server, and they're doing gaming events and different things like that. So the VFW is trying to get out there and experience things with the gaming community and try to make a difference. So I feel like as long as they keep pushing out there and try, that it's something that will make a difference. And folks are getting all upset about the VFW and their imagery that they're using lately, and that they're saying that it's a threat to government members and senators, that they've got a picture of a firing squad pointing at veterans themselves, because one of these bills that they're trying to pass is robbing from our own people. If you're going to pay for a program but you're going to take from another program, it's not helping anybody. We don't do that in the service. It's called a Blue Falcon, a Bravo Foxtrot, a buddy fucker. And we don't do that. We would rather go without than
take from our brother. I was on the fence. I was on the fence about it, because I'm like, and on one side I'm like, oh, it just reinforces the whole veteran stereotype that all we are crazy gun nuts, whatever. And then I thought about it, I'm like, wow, if you're trying to make a statement and get in people's minds what's happening, that's a good way to do it. And then it really came to focus when I learned about what's happening to the Office of the Veteran Advocate here in Massachusetts, where their budget has for the last 4 years has been about $2 million, give or take a couple $100,000. In fiscal year 27, they want to cut the budget to $1 million. They effectively want to gut them to a point where they really can't do anything. And I'm like, that organization was created for a very specific purpose. And I'm like, this is how it happens. It's they're gonna poke and take and pry until they can get their way. And they think that no one's going to call them out on it or watch them. And so on the other point, I'm like, maybe that image didn't go far enough. Maybe that's the problem, is we as veterans have been playing too nice with the people that should be working for us. Right? I mean, that's kind of where I'm at tonight.
I do. I just, I don't feel like, we're pushing out enough to, to fight for ourselves, and the fact that, with the, the act that is the biggest thing that people are pushing against is the Major Richard Starr Act. So the Major Richard Starr Act, for those who don't know, it will help about 59,000 military retirees, guys that include myself. I am in that number, that were medically retired due to injuries that they sustained during their time, forward deployed. So, guys that were in combat when they got their injuries, and that injury that they got in combat caused them to no longer be able to continue service. So because of that, we weren't able to, get the 20-year letter. We weren't able to get past a certain point. And there's a strange rule out there that came out and said that, you can't get a retirement and your VA compensation for your injuries and things like that at the same time. So for every dollar that you get VA, you lose a dollar from your retirement. So instead of getting both, I only get one. But then they came out with combat related special compensation, but that only gives you a small percentage. So of my retirement, I only get $800. As an E7, $800, is nothing for, the retirement. And, it's just wild that, that's what it is, given. And if they were to, change it and correct it, I would be able to get my retirement for the 13 years I did active and, be able to get, the substantial, life-changing ability to be able to, take care of Emily and make sure she's, well taken care of, before I, go off to the next, world. And, make sure that everything's settled here and, be able to, get out there and get a piece of, property and things like that. But right now where it is, we're not getting that. And what they have put forward in the Taking Care of American Veterans Act is a butchered Major Richard Starr Act, where it would take 50% and then 30%, and it wouldn't start until 2027. And at that, you're still only going to get 30% to 50% of the payment. So it's not the clean bill that everybody's been fighting for over the last few years. We're pushing for a clean Richard Starr Act, and we are 5 signatures away from being able to get a vote on the House floor. The bill was, supported by 300 plus House members, to be put forth. And then now that it's looking to be brought to the House floor for a vote, we can't get 218 signatures. There are 60 veterans out there on the House floor that haven't signed this thing. 60 veterans like you and I that refuse to put their name on ink for this thing to come forward to get a vote because, they're being told by their high ups not to.
And this is, because I gotta go here in a second, is the thing. I'm like, if we're not going to get advocated, especially by brother people who have served and sworn the oath, then I'm not going to worry about the VFW's imagery, because in a way, they're right. And that image is a powerful image. And if you're an elected official, it's an uncomfortable one, and it should be. You cannot continue to ask us to give up our youth, give our service, and then find every conceivable way possible to cheap out on us.
Yep.
You expected the government expected the best out of us to, move the mission or the will of the president forward, regardless of which president you served under. Then you owe it to the person that did that to get what their benefit is. Not entitlement, not handout, benefit. So
Yep.
it's just a very trying time right now. And I'm trying to tell, just like you are, other people, other veterans, to speak up. Quit getting online and complaining about it. Sit down and write a letter and put it in the mail, email, call, and then vote. Yes, honor the contract. Very simple. So,
And then this is the other image.
yeah,
And they feel like that's too much. But yet, as you can see, the background today for us, this is what our founders had: join or die.
Right.
And so, what do you've got tonight? Episode 499 coming up for
$499. It's a concept one that, and so it's not that long. But what it is I went to the VA and kind of was like the man on the street, and I learned a whole lot. I had to, figure out some stuff. But I think these clips that you'll see went very well. And then, yeah, like I told you, I'm going to start when I can incorporating drone footage into what I do, and so I think it's going to be a good thing. And yeah, yeah, you can watch it. You can tell me what you think. But
Absolutely.
in some ways it's kind of rough, but in some ways it's kind of like, okay, you know, I do this more often. In a year or two, I'll have this down. Maybe next year I won't be walking around. It would have been a lot easier if I had just had a table and camped out there. But I wanted to walk around, but maybe next year I shouldn't do that. But at least I tried. I got really out of my comfort zone and I had a great time. And, thank you, David Hankey at the VA and everybody who talked with me. Truck to Cost with the Office of the Veteran Advocate, Patty and Alicia. Just everybody was great. It's a really great time. If you get a chance to go to one of those, you should.
And it's just, the big thing out there, check up with, Travis on, OscarMikeRadio.com. You can, find all the different platforms that he's going to be on, streaming here on YouTube and beyond. I will be having a special war on Monday. I'll have H-Town veteran on. Travis, you're welcome to join. If you got previous engagements, I understand. Touch base with you offline on this. And then next week, we'll prep into, episode 500.
All right.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. We are resilient. We are WAR. And we'll see you guys, next week. I'm got to get the video to end here. Give you guys, some breathing exercises to, just be able to relax and, get rid of the stupid shit that's going on in our lives. Have a good one, guys.